Okay, great. So I just started recording on my side. If you'd like to record on your side as well, I gave you made you co-host so you can record
That,
your.
that would be great. We like to record as well, just so we don't have to take notes. We can
That sounds great.
talk freely, and then if we've got to, get a name or check something, we can.
So if you hit Control R or Alt R on your computer, it'll start recording locally. Oh yeah, there you go. I see you recording. And then I also turned on the transcription, so it's at the bottom there.
Fantastic.
I'm thinking of the following. I'm thinking that we should get started and just simply recap when he joins, because
I think that's fine. I think that's
given the
that's a
family
very good plan.
situation, if there's a chance that he does not join, then it's not worth wasting our time to.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you were recommended to us by one of our contacts there at WGBH as somebody that we should speak to as we start to get our heads together to do this film. And
Beautiful.
we are at the, very beginning of the process, trying to figure out what we're going to do and what direction we're going to take. There's obviously been a lot done and said already on AI since the ChatGPT story kind of broke late last year. Tell me a little bit about what you do there at MIT and what your piece of the artificial intelligence portfolio is all about.
So before we begin, are you what city do you live in?
I'm in Florida.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
on Wednesday, we're hosting an event at the Boston Museum of Science with me and the president of the Museum of Science co-hosting on AI in society.
Okay, fantastic. Will that be live streamed or anything like that?
And no plans for now, but we will probably record it so that we can play it back.
Sure. Oh, here comes Will. Excellent. Hey, Will, how are you? Will is, I think your settings have the camera off and the microphone muted, so I think that takes everybody a minute to sort of say, "Oh, I gotta mute." Hey, Will, how are you?
Hi, Will. Good. How are you? Apologize for being late. I had trouble finding that password, and I found it in the invitation. Sorry about that.
No problem. I also texted you with the information.
Oh, sorry about that. My phone's in the other room. Apologies.
Bases. You gotta love that shirt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Last month we did a big project at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign.
I love it.
They were freely handing out T-shirts at the end. So Will's got his.
I got my free shirt. Yep.
That's awesome. I shared with both of you a document that we can use as notes, and I'm just going to be going through it. So these are the questions that I had sort of gathered from Will.
And yes. Yep.
I'm happy to just dive in, and then I can give a quick intro as to who I am and sort of where do I come from and all of that.
That'd be great.
As we talk, feel free to take notes in that document so I can see your reactions, and feel free to add additional questions at the bottom as you think of them, because basically, we can use that as our guide to just make our meeting as productive as possible. Okay. So basically, I'll start with who am I and sort of where do I come from. So, and by the way, sometimes I stand up while I'm talking, just so I'm more comfortable. I hope that's okay with you guys.
Sure.
That's fine.
Okay, so so I'm a professor in the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory here at MIT CSAIL, we call it, CS AI Lab. So I'm a professor in the AI and data science part of the department. I'm also a part of the algorithms, machine learning, and my day job is applying all of that to understand life, to understand the programming language of DNA, and to understand how genetic disease happens. So basically, my team has developed a lot of resources for understanding the human genome. So basically, the current human gene set, knowing where the genes are, this is something that came out of my team. Knowing where the regulatory control regions, that also came out of my team. The Human Epigenome Project, this is something that I led and sort of created a resource that tells us how different cells in the human body turn on and turn off. And then about 14, 15 years ago, we kind of switched to understanding disease. and we've written papers on Alzheimer's, neurodegeneration, cardiovascular, psychiatric, obesity, taken disease after disease and sort of elucidating new mechanisms underlying that. I teach in AI and machine learning. So basically my research is about how do we use all of these tools for understanding disease, but I also teach the tools themselves. So basically I've thought a lot about artificial intelligence for 2 decades now. I've thought about machine learning, statistics, algorithms, and in my own research, we're kind of using all of these large language models, ChatGPT, these transformer models, etc., for understanding biology, for understanding biological knowledge, etc. So it's in that capacity that I will sort of answer some of those questions, and then we can add more questions as we go. But basically, let's dive right in. And again, I'm hoping to sort of finish all of these questions in the next 10 minutes or so, but then we can kind of go back and ask a lot more.
Sure.
Number one, what is artificial intelligence? So basically defining it is, very difficult because it is many, many different things. But basically the one possible definition of machine learning more broadly is the ability to learn from experience. So you have data out there, you have experiences, you have a task that you're trying to do, and machine learning and artificial intelligence is using the data to get better at the task in a very simple way. So it's basically, how can machines do the thing that humans do all the time, which is do something and get better at it, okay? Mm-hmm. So artificial intelligence has many facets. There's many different flavors of artificial intelligence. The more traditional flavor that came out of the MIT AI lab over the last maybe 8 decades is the one of, we want to build systems that have human-like capabilities. And the way that you can have human-like capabilities is multifold. You can have human-like capabilities by hard coding these behaviors. And by the way, Will, Kate is recording it on her side, but yes. I also co-host. If you would like to record locally, feel free to just hit record on your laptop.
That's okay. I think Kate and I can share after, and we usually transcribe it so we don't have to.
Okay.
We can see the same notes. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Beautiful. So basically, the traditional AI was about, for example, packing groceries. What are the rules that I need to encode? And the rules are, I want to put the frozen stuff with the frozen stuff. I want to put the hot with the hot. I want to sort of, double bag the heavy stuff, etc. So these are rules that humans encoded based on observations that humans made. And we hired a bunch of experts and we made those rules, we encoded them. That was taking knowledge from the world and hard coding it. That's the old AI. That's the way that we kind of tricked machines into acting as if they were intelligent, but they weren't really intelligent. They were hard coded behaviors that made them look intelligent. Then came for example, when Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov. So Deep Blue was evaluating positions and searching through possibilities. So every position of chess, you can have a score associated with that. And then you can run an algorithm called minimax that minimizes, the score of the opponent, maximizes your score, minimizes the score of the opponent, maximizes your score in subsequent steps of adversarial games. And then you can analyze that tree and then choose the position that, assuming perfect play from the opponent, gives you the best score for yourself. This is, again, old AI. Basically hard coding the scores, hard coding the rules, and then letting the system explore a large number of possibilities to find the best solution. In the end, seeming intelligent, but it's solving things based on brute force. Mm-hmm. New AI is dramatically different. New AI is all about machine learning. It's all about data. It's all about you let the system learn from experiences in the world. So what changed recently is the concept of learning from data, and that's sort of the difference between traditional AI and machine learning. What machine learning does is that it encodes all of these types of decisions in a statistical framework, and then it evaluates a very large number of possibilities and then improves through some kind of gradient descent or other ways, improves the decisions and the choices that the machine makes. Now, if you look at the way that Deep Blue worked versus the way that AlphaZero works, they're completely different. What AlphaZero did is, from DeepMind, that's owned by Google, is it learned how to play chess just by learning the rules and playing against itself. And that's it. And the way that it learned was not a hard-coded rule set based of decisions. It was instead learning patterns of behavior, patterns of actions. So when you see this pattern in the chessboard, you do that. When you see this pattern, you do this, etc. It was really about not so much the evaluation of the position, not so much the depth of the search, but the intuition that human expert players have. And if you look at image recognition, I have this axis that I've drawn for my kids. Just a second. Some reason. Just one second. Okay, great. Beautiful. Good. All right. So let me share my screen for a second. I initially made this slide for my third grade kid when I was asked to come and teach about AI to a third grader. So basically
about my level. Thank you.
So I drew two axes: the things that are easy for or hard for humans, and the things that are easy or hard for machines. And traditionally, chess, math, integration, reasoning, logic, planning, all of that has been hard for humans. We spent decades teaching humans how to do this. And it was hard for humans, but it turns out that for classical AI, this was actually quite easy for machines because they follow rules. When we teach humans how to do integration by parts, we're teaching them an algorithm. Machines are great at algorithms. We're teaching them a recipe. Machines are great at following recipes. They're great at following rules. And this is the stuff that made classical AI successful. It was doing stuff that was hard for humans, but easy for machines. At the other end of the spectrum, recognizing your baby or your grandma, finding a dog in a field, chasing that dog, this is trivial. Like a 3-year-old can do that, but it's extremely difficult for machines. That's the place that changed recently. That's where deep learning, and that's where generative AI, and that's where all of these things live. So basically, machines being able to play Jeopardy, being able to understand human language, recognize human faces, understand images and scenes, drive, manipulate objects, and ultimately general intelligence, having common sense, etc. That has been traditionally very hard for machines, but trivial for humans. And that's the revolution that we're at now. So we have machines that suddenly can do the whole spectrum. And I kind of, like to draw these, AI is many, many things. And knowledge bases, packing groceries, for example, is the stuff that traditional AI is known for. Machine learning is not just having an input and an output with hand designed features, but having some kind of mapping from the features, being able to sort of weigh the features. You now have a large number of choices and you weigh them differently. And based on the output, you want to change the weights so that you do a better output. Now, representation learning is what deep learning is about. And representation learning basically means that I'm no longer going to be hand designing the features. The features themselves are going to be learned. And I can then do the mapping from the features. So instead of the features basically being, I want to pack groceries. So how am I going to do that? I'm going to have a vision system that's going to be looking at the groceries. And I'm going to hard code what a bottle looks like. And I'm going to hard code what a bag of carrots looks like. And all of this is hard coded. And I'm sort of spending thousands of hours of humans hard coding features that the AI will then be able to weigh up and down. Okay. So that's the second step of hand designing features, but I can weigh them differently. The next step here of representation learning is that I'm going to actually learn from experience what bags of carrots look like. Instead of the experts hard coding it, I'm just going to show thousands of images of carrots, and it's going to learn what are the types of things that carrots are recognized by. One is the color, one is particular shapes of edges, the other one is the hue, the other one is the sort of, cadence of different pixels on the image and the frequency with which they're appearing, etc. So these are suddenly representations. This is learning the natural world. Understanding the concept of a carrot, understanding the concept of a human, understanding the concept of a bag. That's what the new AI and the new sort of machine learning and the new deep learning is all about. Okay, it's learning these representations. And now what deep learning is about is, instead of just saying we're going to learn some features, we're going to learn a hierarchy of features that at the base, I'm going to have edges. And then above that, I'm going to have, shapes. And above the shapes, I'm going to have, maps, etc. So the same way that our visual cortex has layers of neurons. So basically, within our visual cortex, we have layers and layers of neurons. If you look at the visual cortex of humans, you basically have all of these layers, and all of these layers are basically learning more and more abstract representations. They're basically recognizing dots, the orientation, basic connections, and then ultimately complex features, to the point that many humans have a neuron for recognizing Jeff Bezos. Like, there's a combination of features that it's built from. And that's where all of this extraordinary expansion of the neocortex has happened in humans. This is the brain of a mouse to scale, of a macaque, of a chimp, and of a human. And the human brain, you can see here where the eyes are, half of our skull is actually brain. Like, the chimp kind of ends here. All of this stuff is neocortex. And that's where all of these representations are being learned. So the fact that you can recognize a person from parts. Okay? What I always do when I teach is, who feels that they've learned something? Yes? Awesome. Great.
This is great. Yeah.
Okay, great. So basically, this is just to define what is AI. And what changed recently is the concept of representation learning. The fact that I can give you a set of examples, and from those examples, you can learn stuff. And let's see if I have some data for this. Deep learning, for example. Great. Let's dive right in there. And I'm going to give you some examples for how deep learning actually works. Okay. So the way that we can recognize images, for example, is, when I show you this, you immediately see Abraham Lincoln. And, if you squint, you see Lincoln. What the machine sees is, a vector of pixels. It basically sees these numbers. This is what the machine sees. So the question is, how do you take a string of, 200 numbers and recognize Lincoln? It seems like magic. And you could basically say, okay, well, let's build a neural network and we're going to have some inputs and every pixel is going to be up-weighted or down-weighted, and it will eventually recognize this particular image of Lincoln. But how do you recognize every possible image of Lincoln? How do you recognize every possible posture of a person? And the difference is here. So the classical fully connected neural networks of the 1960s were basically saying, I'm going to have a category of dog, cat, boat, or bird, and I'm going to have some input pixels. And based on the pixels, I'm going to have a fully connected network, and I'm going to change the weights, and I'm going to predict this. But what modern AI does, it basically says, well, I have a patch of an image, and in that patch, I can extract representations. I can extract convolutions. I can extract filters. What is a filter? Let me give you an example of a filter. This filter recognizes edges. This is a filter that I apply on the patch of an image, and it recognizes when I switch from a high intensity to a low intensity pixel. Every time I switch from black to white, this filter gives me a high score. And every time I stay within black, this filter doesn't even fire. When I'm entirely in white, it doesn't fire, because this and that value are exactly the same. Are you with me?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I'm taking the value of this pixel and the value of that pixel, I'm subtracting them, and then that gives me nothing here, nothing there. But every time I transition from black to white or white to black, I basically have a firing of that pixel. In the same way that neurons in your brain fire when you see an edge, we now have neurons that are firing when they see this. And this is at the bottom. Then above it, I can basically have features that are built on that and features that are built on those features, etc. And at the basis, all I do is recognize edges. Above that, I recognize things that look like noses and ears and eyes. And above that, I recognize parts of a face. Okay? That's what happened recently in deep learning. Recently is that we now have ways of understanding that middle part as well. So basically, when I was describing, just 1 second. There you go. So this concept that I can not only predict what's a dog, a cat, and a boat, but also learn features about the natural world that I'm extracting de novo. And how am I doing that? By having 1 million images that are labeled by humans as this has a boat, or this has a bird, or this has a dog. And then adjusting the representations that I'm learning internally, which are hierarchical, and therefore I have layers of abstraction, learning about edges, learning about objects, learning about mouths and noses, etc. And then ultimately predicting this. And the beauty of it, the key concept that has dramatically changed is we always used to have an X, which is the data, and we always used to have a Y, which is the label. That was always there. The difference is Z, the latent space representation. The fact that I can have a representation for the concept of carrots, not just if I see something orange, I do this, but the concept that, whoa, there's something called carrots that humans call carrots that I've learned just by observing data. Do you guys feel that you've learned stuff? Yes? Good.
Yes.
That's what's different about AI. What's different about today is that we're learning representations. Okay? And now let's dive all the way to ChatGPT. What is ChatGPT doing? In fact, I'm going to make a small parenthesis, but maybe I'll make the parenthesis right after. What ChatGPT is doing is that it learned the concept of empathy. It learned the concept of anger. It learned the concept of the style of Shakespeare. It learned the concept of a poem, of a particular, rhythm, and so on and so forth. It also learned the concept of king and queen and man and woman and boy and girl. And it also learned the concept that the transformation of king to queen is the same as the transformation from boy to girl, and it's the same as the transformation from man to woman. Okay, let me dive into ChatGPT for a second. Okay, so language models. So what are language models? It's a model of human language. And the key concept that I want you to understand within here is the concept of word to vec. And it sounds crazy, but I hope if you don't know about this already, that your mind will be blown in the next few minutes. Okay. So I heard a lecture recently. I invited a guest lecturer for my class on visualization. And he basically said, well, there's things that we can compare. For example, 10 and 3, you can compare them quantitatively. 10 is, 3.5 times bigger than 3. You can compare deep blue and light blue. It's a continuous scale. But you can't compare apples and oranges. They're two separate things. And I raised my hand and I said, excuse me, you can. Right? And I hope your mind will be blown by what's about to happen. Okay? I can project every English word into a vector, a point in a super high dimensional space of all of human knowledge. I can take the concept of a man and project it somewhere. And I can take the concept of a woman and project it somewhere. And I can take several, 3, 2, few, 5, 4, 6, the number 20, etc. And I can project them all. And I can take the word chief, head, president, chairman, director, executive, trader, analyst, and I can project them all. I want you to understand the concept of an embedding space where ideas live, where ideas that are proximal to each other live near each other in that space. And suddenly, I can compare apples and oranges. Something that was never possible in the history of humanity is now possible. I can take words and project them in an embedding space. And what's crazy is that I can do vector operations in that language, in that knowledge space, in that embedding space of ideas. I can take the transformation from king to queen and apply it to uncle to aunt, man to woman, boy to girl, etc. That basically there is a vector space, there's an embedding space, there's a latent space of knowledge, of ideas, where I can represent every human concept and I can project every word to that concept. So for the first time in humanity, machines don't have to play smart. They can actually understand human concepts. Do you feel that you learned something? Yes?
I think so. Yeah.
Good. Good. So the question now is, how do you now project things into that latent space? The way that you're going to project that is the same way that we're going to learn how to recognize boats and cats and dogs and ants, etc. We're going to learn through a pretext task. What's a pretext task? It's a task I don't really care about. But the only way to get good at that task is to learn the thing that I actually want you to learn about. So when I teach my kids how to do long division, it's a pretext task. I don't care about long division. Machines do long divisions. Adults don't do that anymore. Only kids do it. Why? Because getting good at long division means you'll get good at taking complex problems, breaking them into parts, following rules, understanding concepts, and so on and so forth. In the same way, I can get my machines to recognize a boat. And to do that, it basically has to learn the representation of a boat. But to do that, I needed to teach machines that there are millions of hand-labeled human expert time images of boat, 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 cat, 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 dog, 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 etc. How do I throw away the need for human training? I do that using a pretext task, okay? And what's a pretext task? It's a task that I can, just one second. I teach that stuff over weeks and weeks and weeks. I'm trying to do that all in like a few hours. in a few minutes. So it's going to be very difficult. But here's
okay.
here's a pretext task. I take an image. I take gazillions of these images. I take billions of these images because I don't need humans anymore. I take billions of these images and I cut them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I ask the machine to predict where does each patch of an image go. Do I care about that? Of course not. I already have the answer. I know where they go. I cut them in the first place. But what it does is that it turns an unsupervised learning problem into a supervised learning problem. It basically takes an image that I have no idea what's in that image. I don't know whether there's a cat or a dog or a puma or an elephant or, you know, a spaceship in there. All I know is that I can take an image that was taken from the natural world, I can cut it up, and I can put it back in a way that I now know the answer to a hard problem. And the machine can get better at solving these hard problems. And the only way that the machine can get good at that is by actually understanding all of human knowledge, understanding every scene that can possibly be seen in the natural world. With me so far? Good. So I could have just told you about how wonderful AI is, but you asked me what is it and what has changed, and I'm bombarding you with knowledge that maybe your viewers don't need to know, but maybe they do.
This is good. This is good because I think that's kind of one of the questions we've been tasked to answer for the show, because you hear AI every day, but I don't think many people understand exactly what it is and what it's doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important for us to understand and explain to people. And when we get time, and you've given some examples, but when it's time to make the show, we have to figure out a way to do this visually, so people understand and feel like you're starting to give us some pretty good ideas for that.
And I can send you tens of hours of recordings of me teaching about.
We're getting the Cliff Notes version. This is good though. This is important.
Perfect. And now let me tell you about large language models. Let me tell you about how do you make Word2Vec? How do you take an idea and you project it into that knowledge space? How do you do that? You do that in the same way that you do these pretext tasks. Remember when, like, you've probably heard, oh, what ChatGPT does is next word prediction. You've heard that, right? Next word prediction. Yeah. It sounds stupid, silly. You certainly look down upon it. But in fact, next word prediction is not a task. It's a pretext task. Because the only way to get good at next word prediction, not just for 2 or 3 or 5 words, but for any word in any context, is to freaking understand all of human language, all of human knowledge, every concept, everything about humanity. And we've just allowed machines to do that. It's frightening, but it's empowering at the same time. It basically means that we can have the best assistants in the world, but it also means that those assistants will be way smarter than we are in any one of those tasks. And that's something that humanity will need to grapple with. We've unleashed the genie out of the bottle. We have now taught machines how to understand human concepts. We've taken next word prediction and we've built 1 billion parameters to get good at next word prediction. It could have just said, oh, I'm just going to take the previous 4 words and just see what 5th word appeared every time I saw the previous 4 words in all of human text. And it would have been pretty good, but it wouldn't be able to reason the way that it is reasoning now. All of that is emergent behavior. It's emergent behavior because it has all of these billions of parameters, and it can do this representation learning of concepts. The concept of being angry, the concept of a wife, the concept of an argument, the concept of a child, of poverty, of justice. All of these concepts are sitting in that latent space in this representation learning, from the bottom of the pixels to the lines and the edges and the mouth and the eyes. from the bottom of the individual words and phonemes and Latin and Greek roots to the compound words that are sort of being put together, to the styles and feelings and emotions. All of that, the machines have now learned. And that's what sort of, sits at the core of it all. Okay. So basically the way that ChatGPT was learned and the way that word2vec was possible, translating a word into a vector in embedding space, the way that's possible is because I can take millions of documents, and for every one of those documents, ask what is the context in which the word man appears, and the word president appears, and the word janitor appears, and the word nurse appears, etc. And through the context of all of the words, I can start projecting these words into the embedding space of representations. So apple and oranges are for the first time comparable because we can look at the context in which they're being used, and we can recognize that they're actually quite similar to each other, whereas apple and space shuttle are very different from each other. And now the concept of transformers. Have you heard of transformers? They basically say that at the core, and attention learning, etc. So at the core of large language models, at the core of ChatGPT, what's GPT? It stands for generative, pre-trained, transformer. Okay? To be able to explain to you even the acronym of GPT that everybody's using. I hear so many people saying GTP. I'm like, no, it's GPT. Generative, pre-trained, transformer. Transformer is this model that was invented by Google in 2017 in a paper called Attention is All You Need. And transformer and attention are very coupled to each other. So what transformers are is the way in which you can create, when I say the word apple, you hear a fruit because I said orange earlier. But when I say the word apple next to Microsoft, you now think of a completely different entity. And we have the ability to understand both because of transformers, because the word apple within our head can take multiple meanings based on the context of the other words within there. So how do we map words to a conceptual embedding space? I can take king and queen, man and woman, and individual letters. And based on the, like here, I'm basically projecting individual letters. You have A, E, and X, and T, 4, etc. These are individual letters that are getting projected. But if I do that with little data, it's nonsensical. If I start doing that with more data, you start seeing that all the consonants are together, and all the vowels are together, and all the numbers are together. And this is the way in which GPT, for example, does addition. Just simply knowing that numbers that are similar to each other are near each other. And that's why it sucks at addition, because it's only doing the stuff that has been traditionally very hard for machines. Remember in my very first slide that I showed you, I basically said there's some stuff that's good with machines and stuff that's difficult for humans. And basically being able to anyway, I want to kind of stop there because I'm drifting away. We have very little time left.
Yeah.
But basically, the way that you're able to sort of project into that embedding space is through the same type of pretext task of predicting the next word. And then you are learning about this embedding space representation by looking at what's in the nearby context. And a word like apple can change its meaning from fruit to a company by the context in which those other words in the same sentence are. Because every word in that sentence will push you to some dimension, to some space. And if all the other words are talking about a company, suddenly the meaning of apple will be very different in that context. And the meaning of apple of, oh, I gave 3 apples to my daughter is very different than, the manager ordered 3 apples for the team. Like, no, the manager probably ordered 3 computers, and to my daughter, I gave 3 fruits. But the concept, based on the context of the rest of the sentence, can basically move. So the embedding projection of the word apple is guided by the context of the sentence in which it lives. Okay? So now let's go to the last part of your questions, which is, what are the implications? Where do we go from here? So basically, I started with, what is it? What has changed recently? How does it work? And now, what can it do? What are the implications? What it cannot do? What are the implications? And what will the next wave of AI look like? Okay, so basically, let's dive in. What it can do is almost anything. Very frightened. Anything that you and I and the smartest person in the world can be good at, anything that we can be good at, it can do probably way better. Let's embrace that. Let's cope with that. Let's understand that deep down. Number one.
It can, or it will be able to.
It probably already can, when trained in the right context. The architectures that we talked about can do music understanding, they can do image understanding, they can do emotion understanding, they can do video understanding, they can do language understanding better than the vast majority of humans. Maybe there's a few humans left that can do better. But for now, if I take the smartest person in the world in every domain that ChatGPT is good at, that person will get a lower average score than GPT. I promise you. You take the smartest nuclear physicist and you ask them about 13th century French literature or the geopolitics of Europe in 1455, it'll do pretty poorly. So in an average score, ChatGPT surpasses the best we've got in terms of humanity. Okay, I just want us to cope with that, because it's nice to be sort of telling humans, you're fine, you're good, it'll be okay. But at the same time, we have to prepare them for this, that in any one thing that humans are extremely good at, that you can evaluate humans on, that you can score humans on, GPT already does better on average than any one human. And in 5 years, probably almost anything. Okay. Second, we're in an exponential curve. It looks very steep now compared to 5 months ago, because we're in an exponential. But guess what? 5 months ago, it looks steeper than 5 months before that, and so on and so forth. That's what the exponential does. In any one time period, it is twice as fast as the previous time period. And right now, it just started surpassing humanity. And that's why we're all shocked. But it hasn't slowed down. It's only speeding up. Moreover, those tools are now finally intellectual tools. So that basically means that we can get better at making them better. So coding AI models just got way faster. And that means the next AI model will appear way faster than if we didn't have already AI, because it can write programs way better than humans can. Now, what can it not do? Okay. Humans have agency. Humans make decisions. Humans have common sense. Just 1 second. I'm going to open up another document. Okay. So I gave a talk recently talking about what it cannot do. And I mean, what it can and cannot do. And one of the things that I said, it needs reasoning, it needs causality, fact checking, transparency, fairness, common sense, creativity, empathy, efficiency, and generalizability. So I can go through what each of these words mean, but basically I'll copy paste them in the document.
Thank you.
So reasoning, causality, fact-checking, transparency, fairness, common sense, creativity, empathy, efficiency, and generalizability. Okay, so basically there's many things that it still kind of sucks at. And the reason is that it's a hollow machine. There's nothing behind it. Basically, these LLMs that I described to you, large language models, these attention mechanisms, these transformers, this projection into this space, it's hollow. There's nothing there. There's no reasoning. It's just empty. It's just the context and the correlations is all that matters. It's extraordinary, but it's hollow. However, we have 50 years of AI preceding it that hasn't yet been plugged in. We've built these reasoning systems. We've built these, physical systems. We've built these embodied intelligence systems. We just haven't plugged them in to GPT-4 yet. Okay, so that's why it's hollow today, but in a few years, the integration of all of these different types of artificial intelligence will be transformative. We will have reasoning by actually having models of the world. We will have causality by understanding action reaction, by being able to experiment in the world. We will have fact-checking by simply plugging it into encyclopedias. We'll have transparency by being more explicit about the internal representations of all of these models. We will have fairness by explicitly modeling the unfairness and then adding fairness variables within it by understanding the biases that humans have. And again, we're saying, oh, machines will be biased. I mean, I'm sorry, humans suck at being unbiased. I mean, we are horrible creatures. We're not ethical. We're not just. We're self-serving. I mean, humans are pretty horrible. AI might be the best hope to teach humans how to be more empathetic, how to be more just, more fair, etc. But we can explicitly model the unfairness of humanity and add in compensatory variables to outweigh fairness. Common sense, being able to sort of reason about the world, that'll probably be harder, but it's getting there. Creativity. We like to think that humans are creative, but maybe we're just extrapolating from existing data. Maybe we're just, mixing and matching things. Maybe the humans that we call creative are no different than just taking these Word2Vec and just adding them up in the same direction. Empathy, are we really empathetic? Maybe we're faking it. Maybe you and I are faking it as much as the machine is faking it. And ChatGPT can fake empathy pretty well. We feel bad when something happens. When we see a dog getting run over by a truck, breaks our heart. We kind of feel it. We have an emotion. We're describing it in words, but the machines can describe it in words probably better than we can. So it won't have empathy, but it'll certainly be able to fake empathy. And the question is, do we really have it? Yeah, I think we do. But, does it matter if you can fake it just as well? Not clear. Efficiency. Right now, these models are extremely expensive. They're using billions of parameters, condensing them down to sort of the size of, between our ears. I mean, we are extremely efficient. We're burning 3 watts. We can do extraordinary computations. Machine can't. And, that's part of it. The challenge ahead. How do we make them smaller? Generalizability is sort of the next frontier as well. It's basically being able to sort of extrapolate from existing problems to new problems, being able to sort of use metaphors that this to that is like this to this, etc. So anyway, basically the next wave of AI will be much more integrated into the physical world, have much more better sense, etc. Was this helpful?
Very, very helpful.
Extremely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes. So let me ask you one question. You indicated at the very beginning that your lab was working on applying artificial intelligence to researching disease. Tell us a little bit more about that. Are you?
I am so excited to tell you about that. You have no idea how transformative. So let me tell you one of the projects. We have dozens of projects on Alzheimer's, on cardiovascular disease, on schizophrenia, on obesity, metabolism, etc. What are we finding? What we're doing is that we're uncovering from. So let me step back a little bit. So the way that genetics has traditionally worked is hammers. We basically took a hammer, we knocked out a gene in a mouse, and we saw what that gene does. We basically took isogenic mice, which are identical in every other way, in the same cages, in the same environment, and we basically took a giant hammer and we smashed one of the genes. And then we saw that the mouse could no longer remember how to get out of the maze. And we're like, aha, that gene probably has to do with memory. We smashed another one, that mouse no longer had good blood circulation. Like, that's probably what that gene does, etc. That's how genetics has worked traditionally. What's unique with humans is obviously we can't do these experiments. But what's extraordinary with humans is that we now have genetic variation across 8 billion people. We can, in this extraordinary diversity of humanity, look at not hammers anymore, but tiny little needles. And we can look at the set of 6 million needles that I have inherited, the set of 6 million needles that Will has inherited, and see how Will and I are different from each other in hundreds of ways. But we don't just have Will and me, we have thousands and millions of people that we now have genetics and phenotype, the observations of what came out of the genetics for. So what we are trying to do, and what we're doing actually extremely successfully, is understand not just hammers anymore, but now needles, of how every single one of these needles contributes in a network and a circuit of every one of our cells to the observation, to the phenotypes that we now observe for all of these humans. So to give you one example, we're looking at the UK Biobank, which is 1 million people with genetics and phenotypes. And we're looking at the correlations between genetic differences and phenotypic differences. And if I only had one person, again, with one person is not possible because I would need to have an isogenic person, like 2 identical twins that differ by 1 letter. They're probably still identical, and that letter probably doesn't matter. But in the context of thousands of people, I can basically correct for all of these other needles that are changing, and I can have all of this variability and sort of ask, if I have this needle pointing or this needle not pointing, what is the difference in thousands of people that have all of these other needles pushing them up and down, all of these other genetic variants? So I can ask about the effect of any one of these variants in the context of all of this other variation. And what my group is doing now is asking across thousands of humans. We have, for example, heart samples from open heart surgery from hundreds of people. And we can see the same genetic difference that is associated with coronary artery disease. What is it actually changing when I look at the heart of that patient that has the variant or doesn't have the variant? And through that, we're able to understand how these genetic variants, these tiny little needles, are impacting the entire network and circuitry of thousands of variables. We have 20,000 genes. We have trillions of cells. We have hundreds of cell types. We have 2.3 million control regulatory elements. So we now have, like my group has built all of these resources over the last 2 decades, 2.5 decades. We've built these resources for understanding the human genome and its circuitry for every cell type. And we've now started mapping how the genetic variants that are associated with disease are influencing all of these intermediate circuits. So we can now say this genetic variant that causes obesity, and that's a paper that we had in the New England Journal of Medicine, this genetic variant that is associated with obesity is in fact leading to a change in the differentiation of adipocytes as they spend the first 3 days of differentiation to become mature white adipocytes or mature brown adipocytes. The white adipocytes are called white because they store calories in lipids and they are fat and big and juicy. And the brown adipocytes are brown because they have a lot of iron, because they have mitochondria, and because they are burning calories as heat. So what we saw is that the strongest genetic association with obesity is in fact choosing whether your fat cells will become fat burning or fat storing cells. And we were able to go back and change a single letter and change thermogenesis, the generation of heat within the adipocytes, within the fat cells of donors with obesity risk or without obesity risk. And the last time I ate was yesterday. I haven't had anything to eat. This morning, I was in the gym for an hour, lifting weights, rowing, biking. Why? Because I'm actually obesity risk. I would be obese if I didn't work my butt off every single day to sort of stay normal. And I have all kinds of genetic predispositions, just like all of us do. By understanding the mechanism, I can understand that I need thermogenic fat and I need thermogenesis. So I will exercise my muscles to basically make up for the lack of thermogenesis in my fat cells. So by understanding this, I can intervene molecularly. We showed that the strongest genetic association with Alzheimer's changes lipid transport inside our brain. The cholesterol gets stuck in the endoplasmic reticulum of oligodendrocytes that protect the neurons by myelination. There's a sheath of myelin, of fat, that basically protects the neurons so that signals can transfer, so that injuries don't destroy the neuronal connections. And we showed that by restoring cholesterol transport, we can restore myelination, we can restore cognition in mice. So what does my group do? What my group does is that we're finding these thousands of needles and we're understanding the circuits, and then we go in and perturb these circuits. I made this introduction, but I wanted to tell you about one project that we have, which is very cool. It basically says, can we understand the language of proteins? So we're building not large language models, we're building protein language models. So these language models are basically allowing us to understand the language of protein folding. So we all heard about AlphaFold and the ability to now fold proteins in 3 dimensions based on just their sequence. So we've now built a model that allows you to understand the language of protein folding and project every protein fold, every protein based on the combination of folds, just like every sentence based on the combination of words. We can project every protein based on the combination of its folds to a location in embedding space of protein function. So we can take proteins that have similar folds, similar combinations of folds, and put them similar to each other, proximal to each other. But for every protein, we also have a description of its function based on the PubMed publication that describes the function of that protein. We can take that now and project it into an embedding space of human knowledge about that protein as well. And we can use something called CLIP, or contrastive learning, to basically push those 2 embedding spaces on top of each other, so that the same location can be translated either as a protein structure or as a description of that protein's function. What does that allow us to do now? It allows us to describe in human words what we would like a protein to do and have the system design a protein for us. Or we can take a new protein that has never been observed before and get an English description of what it does. And these are 2 towers, the tower of protein language and the tower of human language. But we can take the tower of gene expression levels. We can look at the expression patterns of that same protein across every condition that has ever been observed, and now start asking about how we can translate gene expression into protein function, into protein structure. We can do the same with electronic health records. We can basically take every human that had a mutation in that protein and then project it into the phenotypic space that I would expect for that person carrying a mutation in that protein that disrupts that domain. So one of the ways in which AI is transforming medicine is by allowing these types of translations across these different data modalities. Humans are amazing creatures. We evolved in Africa to just like have social interactions with each other. And yet our brain has the capacity to understand so much about the natural world. But when it comes to quantum physics, we kind of suck. When it comes to predicting protein folding, we're terrible, horrible at it. If I show you a sequence, you have no idea how it folds. The best human on the planet has no idea how it folds. But machines, by observing billions of these examples, by hiding an amino acid and saying, what do you think that amino acid is? A pretext task. Who cares? Of course I know the answer. I know what amino acid is there, but I'm going to train my machine to predict what amino acid is there. And the only way the machine can get good at it is by understanding the language of protein folding. I hope you guys are excited.
When you do this, this work with protein folding, you know, are you working hand in glove with medical doctors or people who are actually in the business of trying to engineer new synthetic proteins, people who are actually building these things for real world applications, for medical applications? How does your lab interface with the kinds of doctors or pharmaceutical companies or, you know, whatever stakeholder might, you know, be in the mix to translate that into something that's going to be available to help people soon?
Yeah. So we have this new collaboration that we call the Center for Genomic Medicine between myself, a chemist, and someone at the Harvard Medical School. And what we are doing is basically creating this engine for systematically synthesizing new chemistry, automating all of these interventions that we are inventing. So we basically are using machine learning in the sort of synthesis and reaction to basically model every single type of intervention that you could imagine. And we basically have this discovery platform that allows us to now, you know, synthesize thousands of these proteins systematically to sort of create new ways of curing, really curing, not just treating the symptoms, but curing the causes of disease. Because of this way of genetic associations and ultimately mechanism and circuitry, we now know that this is causal, and we can go back and sort of address that. We collaborate with doctors at MGH, in MD Anderson, at Mount Sinai, in Mayo Clinic, to basically gather records from those patients to understand what is driving disease for all of them. And then we are now predicting subclasses of patients based on the combination of genetic, epigenomic, transcriptomic, et cetera, signatures that they have to basically guide the therapy for each patient separately. So basically, our goal is to change the way that we do pharma, to basically transform the, you know, the way that this is being done. And the way to do that is these collaborations. Basically, the, you know, disease is still reigning. We need to transform pharma instead of always being surprised, do prognosis. Instead of doing a lot of misdiagnosis, build better biomarkers, address the root causes of the disease. Don't think them as monolithic disorders. So we have a program that seeks to understand the hallmarks of disease, to basically sort of break up complex traits into distinct pathways where we can understand the causal drivers, understand for each person which pathways are dysregulated for that person, and build for every patient a different combination of treatments, each for that alteration. So basically, we're working across computer science, biology, chemistry, biotech, pharma, patients, hospitals, and so on and so forth, to basically make all that happen. This does not happen in isolation. Everything I'm describing is in collaboration with doctors, with patients, with engineers, with chemists, and so on and so forth.
So this is the personalized medicine that we've heard about for so long actually coming to fruition. And is it, you know, the data is flowing from an oncologist at MD Anderson to you, and you're looking at this individual person's profile, figuring out what's wrong with them and saying, okay, this particular protein therapeutic could really help them. You're able to actually computationally figure out what it is, send it off to your center, and have this protein actually made. Is the loop complete? Is it a closed loop at this point? Is it going back to MD Anderson and they're injecting it into the patient, or is that future work?
Yeah. So the first of all, let me talk about the first part, where basically they I have a little like slide in my door and they send it in and I just keep them out and don't talk to them. this is not at all how it happens. Basically, we collaborate in every aspect. I work with doctors who truly understand computation, and I can hold my own. I truly understand biology. So basically, both parties are completely interdisciplinary and working as teams. There's no situation where they send us a bunch of data, we just say bye-bye and here's the answer, and then that's the answer. Everything is completely collaborative between computer science, biology at all levels. Number two, we can design combination therapies. For example, for cancer, in collaboration with MD Anderson, we basically looked at immunotherapy response for melanoma. Melanoma used to kill people. It was a death sentence. You get melanoma, you're out. It's over. Right now, immunotherapy is working miracles. It's basically reprogramming your own immune system to sort of recognize the cancer, recognize the non-self of the cancer, and sort of develop attacks that will be tuned to that cancer that you have, which is unique to you and no one else in the world. So that's immunotherapy. Immunotherapy works magic, but for only 50% of the patients. The other 50%, they're losing valuable time using a therapy that will not work. So what we're looking at is, number one, who will respond and who will not respond. Number two, for the responders, what's different than from the non-responders that ultimately changes. And we found a regulator that is different. And we said, okay, let's use combination immunotherapy and that regulator. And we tried that, not in humans, but in mice. And what we saw is that the cancer was completely gone. Sort of immunotherapy alone worked well. That drug alone, not really, but the combination abolished the cancer. So basically, yes, we have the ability to predict, sort of tuned, personalized therapies, but from that to the clinic, it's still a long path.
Okay, got it. Will, what are your thoughts? You got questions you want to toss into the mix?
Sure. I mean, well, first I should ask how much more time you have. We've gone over an hour, I think.
I'm very late.
Okay. Because I mean, I do want to say this whole, what you've described has been very helpful for me. I feel like it was kind of a whole black box, and I feel like you've helped me look inside of it a little bit more. And I do appreciate that. And I think we have a lot of work to do on our end to kind of focus where we're going with our film a little bit more, but I'd love to, once we have that and we have the true green light from Nova, I'd love to reach back out to you and talk a little more if you're around. I'm not sure.
Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, are you around this summer? Are you going away?
So Will, basically, first of all,
yes,
as you can tell,
yes,
I have a passion for sharing knowledge.
Yes.
Basically, like I spent more time preparing for my third grader class than any other scientific talk that I've given, because I love to teach. So if I can help you in any way in your mission, whether it's in AI, in language models, in image understanding, in vision, in health, genomic medicine, understanding genomics, period. Like I've been teaching that stuff for 20 plus years, and I have developed a series of metaphors that I'm sort of use to convey it.
That's key for us. And I would like to, I think we're going to have a lot of trouble, whenever you're doing a film about computers, it's always tricky to find something to point the camera at. And I'd love to, once we focus a little bit more, talk a little bit with you about, maybe you have some metaphors that we could use, and just maybe some ideas for demos as well. But I do appreciate your time, and this has been, your passion comes through for sure.
Absolutely.
So basically, number one, I'd love to sort of sit down and brainstorm with you as to what are the best visuals, what are the best metaphors, how do we sort of take this extremely enormous space. I mean, again, for any one of the topics, I was opening presentations, each of which has hundreds of slides. So like we could go for 20 plus hours and still sort of have the same level of excitement and enthusiasm about sort of, how does it actually work? So you like the mission that you guys are accomplishing is enormous. I have so much respect, and I'm truly grateful that we have a chance to talk, because I want to impact the world. I want to sort of convey the knowledge. I want to sort of convey the passion about the stuff that we do. And I can't even begin to express just how excited I am to sort of help you in your project. Number one, I failed to mention that, you know, we have a whole part of my work about the future of work, about how we can use AI to transform the way that we do discovery and that we do innovation. So I have a team of 30 people that is working on how do we take ideas across a corporation and connect people who are working on similar things. How do we map the space of ideas? How do we build an idea navigator in the ways that we can project these sentences into embeddings? We can project papers and citations and GitHub, you know, programming updates and emails and Google Docs and slides into the same embedding space and sort of build connections that were previously not possible, represent the space of knowledge, allow humans to visualize the map of their own knowledge and where they are and what they're missing and where they should go, etc. So there's a whole other aspect.
I know. I'm sure. Sure, we could talk for hours about this. And yeah,
you guys take every one of your episodes and project them into embedding space. like I'm not joking. Like, you know, being able to have a map of knowledge of every documentary PBS has ever produced would be extraordinary. And we could do a whole episode on just that, on basically how does AI work? How does Word2Vec work? How do embeddings work? How do you now use these embeddings for PBS itself? And sort of describe for every one of the staff that you have, what are the things that they worked on? Where do you live and where does Kate live in sort of the space of ideas that you guys have worked on, etc. So basically, you know, there's a whole aspect there for that. There's there's something to be done in just explaining how it works. And there's, of course, all of the ethical, the societal. So the meeting that we have this Wednesday at the Museum of Science with the president of the Museum of Science of Boston is about AI in society. So I hold a series of salons at my house.
I know. I saw the events you have. I'm sorry, I'm out of town this week. I wish I could attend them.
But we basically have, you know, Steven Pinker and, you know, like these Andrew Law and all these extraordinary intellectuals talking about sort of all of these different areas. And this is the picture of our last one. And the person here is the president of the Museum of Science. And he reached out to me, basically saying, can we do something together on AI and society? And, you know, can we host it at the museum? So my guess is that we'll continue having this kind of public outreach events, taking on these extraordinary complex ethical issues and all of these implications and sort of, you know, dissect them out. And I can show you the, you know, the list of people who sign up for those is, you know, extraordinary. Just 1 second, salon, there you go. So this is the RSVP list for, you know, this coming meeting. And if you look at who are the people who are coming, I mean, these are extraordinary individuals, like basically Flagship Pioneering and, you know, BU Law, Justice, Governance, Ethics, Media Lab, Decentralized AI for Healthcare. I mean, this is just an extraordinary set of people.
Yeah.
Are coming together from, you know, all aspects of science, technology, engineering, justice, politics, philosophy, etc., coming together. And at some point, I would love for you guys to start attending those and to sort of have more of the PBS crowd for dissemination, because what we're doing is sort of, you know, trying to just wrap our heads around these complex issues. But if we can share that with the rest of the world, I think that will be amazing. Yeah,
that's our goal, is to explain this to the rest of the country. Well, we'll see how it goes. But you know, with help from people like yourself, we should be able to do it. Yeah.
We can explain that to the whole rest of the country. But if we could get at least our politicians to understand it.
Right.
I mean, like, there's just such a disconnect between these crazy people who want to suddenly regulate AI with all of these requirements, which make no sense. If you understand how these systems work, the regulations that are currently proposed are nonsensical. It basically would, like, forbid me from using voice dictation on my phone. Like,
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
the
they're a little out of touch, I think.
Yeah, and that's the reason why we're like, I would love to sort of interact more and maybe host events together where we can invite the politicians, we can invite the elected officials to help understand, have a communication. Maybe the Museum of Science could host something with you guys as well, and create that conversation. So Tim Rich, I don't know if you know him, but the president of the Museum of Science wants to use this as a way to create a conversation for the whole world, not just for Boston. He
Well, I think
basically,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, continue.
Oh, I was going to say, so we work with, I think I told you, Miles O'Brien, who's the correspondent. And I think he actually recently did a talk at the Museum of Science and a different subject.
So invite Miles if you can make it, but invite other people from PBS. Basically, I know you're out of town, but if they're in town, have them come in to join our community. Forward them the invitation that I sent you, and just have them RSVP, so that they're part of this conversation, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to sort of create a joint sense of responsibility here.
I'll send it over to the executive office of Nova, because Kate and I are, we work for a separate small company that produces the film, but they're the ones who told me about you, so they are aware of what you're doing already. Awesome. Yeah.
But do invite them. Tell them that they're invited. Basically,
I will for sure.
All right.
But thank you so much. I know we went over your time.
Great.
To answer your question, I will be out of town for the next month and a half, but I'm very available on Zoom. Sure. And whenever it's time to sort of start production, or you name it, I'm happy to fly back if necessary, or just chat in the fall. I'll be back mid-August.
Yeah, I imagine we wouldn't get started till fall anyway. But,
yeah, exactly. But I can also connect you with others. Like if you want to sort of meet people in this space.
Yeah, that was you could maybe email me later, but when you have time. But that was going to be another question: is are there other people you recommend us reaching out to? But I can ask over email or text.
Yeah. But again, I have hundreds of hours of recordings of me teaching about every aspect of genomic medicine, AI, language models, GPT, etc. So I can share those with you if you want to sort of really dive in depth. I would really encourage you to play back the recording and pause and look up weird words that I'm using. I try to sort of be as comprehensive.
That's why we record all these. Yes. We're just trying to listen and understand what you're saying. We'll go back and replay it multiple times to get it right.
You do feel that stuff, right? Because that's the thing. I can just chit chat about it, but I can also tell you how it works.
Extremely helpful. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. This is awesome.
Thank you so much. We'll be back in touch. Take it easy.
Yeah. Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.